I'll tell you what, it has been such a depressing week as far as the news goes. What with what's been going on in Palestine, Israel, with the embassy opening, and then the Israeli government murdering a whole bunch of people. That was a nice way to start the week. And then just today, here in the United States, yet another school shooting, 9 people dead. Thank you, Jeffrey, in the live chat. Sucky day to have a live stream too. Thank you. I like to think so. But I thought before I get to the questions, but Dr. Babylon in the chat says we got net neutrality passed, so that is passed in the Senate anyway, so that's good news. That is very good news. I wanted to start with something that is a news story, and it's a news story that it's a story that made me smile, and it is related to another story that made me very sad, and it's not really that important. It's just the sort of thing that gives me a kind of petty glee, and it makes me feel better when I think about it, since there have been some depressing things going on. So I want to share this story with you before I get to the questions. And it's, as I said, it's related to something sad that happened recently, which was the death of Margot Kidder, who was Lois Lane in the Superman movies, the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. She will always be my favorite Lois Lane. She was my first Lois Lane. She was the first live action actor I ever saw playing that character. And I just adore her and adore her version of Lois Lane. And she passed away, unfortunately, a few days ago. But there was a story related to her death that made me smile, and I wanted to share it with you. And it's this one right here. Trump-loving Roseanne Barr shamed by family of late Superman actress. Quote, "She fucking hated what you've become." This made me smile so much when I saw this. And I know it's petty and it's bitter and it's small of me to take such joy in it, but damn it, I don't care. What happened was, after Margot Kidder passed away, Roseanne Barr tweeted, "Rest in peace." And Margot Kidder's nephew, who I had no idea that this was even a thing, but Margot Kidder's nephew is an adjunct professor at Simon Fraser University in British Columbia. And his name, by the way, is Dr. Orion Usner Kidder. What an awesome name. I mean, first of all, let's just talk about that. The guy is Margot Kidder's nephew. That's number one. Number two, his name is Orion Usner Kidder. That is just, I don't know. That's an awesome name. But so he saw that Roseanne had tweeted "R.I.P. Margot Kidder," and this beautiful human being, this kindred spirit of mine, I am quite certain, takes it upon himself to retweet Roseanne Barr and to say, "Hi, I'm her nephew. We were close. I don't even need to check to know she fucking hated what you've turned into. Get her name out of your fascist mouth." And then he went on to say, "Take comfort in knowing she loathed everything you've come to stand for." And then he also said, "Okay, this took off a bit. So, white supremacist, patriarchal capitalism, nay colonialism, are the structural underpinning of today's shitty world. Pick a target and oppose them. Get active. And finally, I'm taking great comfort in the fact that my Aunt Margie would have loved that I got to directly tell Roseanne Barr to fuck right off. Bless your heart, Orion Kidder. I wish there were more people in the world like you." And it just reminded me of reasons totally apart from her acting career why I absolutely adored Margot Kidder, and I'm so grateful to have had her work be a part of my life. She was just, by most accounts that I've read, just a terrific person, and she will always be my Lois Lane. And I was gutted that she died and heartbroken, and I miss her, and I'm probably going to have to find time to watch a Superman movie this weekend. But that story put a smile on my face, and it's nice to have a reason, even if it's a very superficial, petty reason. It's nice to have a reason to smile in the face of her death and the tragedy, the massacre in Gaza, and the school shooting today. There's just so much just awfulness happening that every little bit of sunshine is welcome. So I hope that was welcome for you all watching as well. Now let's get to some questions that were submitted by Patreon patrons. And as usual, when I do these, those of you, I see a bunch of people in the chat. Hi everybody in the chat. if you have questions that you want me to answer during the show and you're in the live chat, please save your question. Oh, thank you, DeWonder Barbar. Thank you very much for the super chat. Save your questions in the live chat until I get through some of these patron questions, and then I'll come back to the live chat. And please, if you ask a question and you asked it way up high in the chat and I didn't scroll back far enough to see it, you know, when there's a lot of folks in the chat, it kind of goes by quick. So if I miss a comment or a question of yours, it's nothing personal. You know, if I don't happen to see it, I try not to spend too much time just sitting quietly and reading through the chat while I'm live. I try to keep things going. So if you say something and you ask a question and I don't get to it, don't take it personally. I'm not skipping you or, you know, giving you the middle finger or anything. And if it's really something you really super duper want to hear me talk about, feel free to post it again when I say I'm looking at the chat. So anyway, patron questions now. Questions from people who have been good enough to support my channel through Patreon at patreon.com/Steve Shives. Let's look at some of these. First up is from Jon Brockman. Would President Pence be worse than President Trump? And would you smack him in the face with a pie? What kind of pie? You know, the Secret Service tracks threats against the president, John. But hypothetically speaking, if we were talking about an imaginary president or an imaginary vice president who happened to share many of the defining qualities that Trump and Pence have, yes, I would absolutely love to see them smacked in the face with a pie. And if I thought I could get away with it, I might even smack him in the face with a pie myself. And what kind of a pie would it be? It would be some kind of a pie with a lot of dairy ingredients that had been left to sit in the sun for a very long time. Some cream and some eggs, you know, something that was very perishable that should probably have been kept chilled and even then should be eaten within a few days. Get one of those, sit it out on the windowsill in June or July, let it get nice and ripe, and then there you go. Then we'll have a pie party with this hypothetical vice president and president who may bear some coincidental resemblance to the current president and vice president. Next question is from Dave Edwards. Thank you, Dave. He says, I'm again dealing with a tough family situation. How do you stay close to members of your families who seem to do nothing but spread their hate of other members? They seem to only want to be your friend if you pick up their attitudes and for you to hate the same people they do. I try so hard to keep my opinions of others not based on what I've heard, but really only on what I've personally experienced from them. Well, that can be kind of a double-edged sword, though, Dave. I mean, first of all, I have to tell you, as is the case in many of the instances where people ask me like for advice or solicit, you know, suggestions for me as to how they should handle a given situation, I'm not always the best person to ask, especially when it comes to family stuff, because I have close relationships with maybe 5 people in my family, and I'm completely fine with that. The rest of my family I could take or leave, and some of them I would prefer just to not see, you know. So I'm not necessarily the best person to ask, because my instinct would be, if there are people in your family that stress you out or that you have trouble getting along with, or whatever the problem is, my instinctive recommendation is fuck them. You don't have to see them. You don't have to spend time with them. But that might not be what you want. You might be looking for a way to stay close, to reconcile, or to make it work. And I'm not necessarily the best person to ask about that, because my instinct is always, if I can get away from the person, I'll just fuck you. You know, you're an asshole. I'm not going to spend time with you. So that's my response. And if you want to get along with them or to still have contact with them, I mean, I think the best thing to do is to either talk to them about the problems you have with their behavior and see if they can knock it off, or if that's not an option and you still want to have contact with them, you're just going to have to put up with it. You're just going to have to swallow it and say, well, if I want to have this person in my life and they're not going to change, this is what I have to accept. And then it's just a matter of what are you willing to accept. As for not judging people except based on what you have personally experienced, that could be a problem, because people could be awful assholes to other people but be nice to you. And if I were in that situation and I found out that a person who was always cool with me, person to person, but was being an asshole to someone else, and I found that out from a reliable source, I didn't think they were just making something up, you know, I would take that seriously, and I would not withhold judgment on the person because, well, they were never like that with me. because there's a lot of room to hide there. And a lot of people, a lot of really, really awful people get a lot of mileage out of hiding in that place where they're cool to a certain group of people. They know they have friends who will vouch for them and say, oh, he was never like that with me. And they can hide there and escape consequences of being an asshole, or being abusive, being whatever. And I don't think that's right. If someone is a family member or a friend of mine and I hear that they have been abusive, my excuse is never, well, he's never been like that around me, because that probably doesn't mean anything. You know, there are people who are terrific around me, or very polite, or very sociable, or friendly. I get along with them, and then it turns out they're shitty to other people for no good reason, and that they're still pricks. And if I find that out, they're not people that I want to be around, whether they're nice to me or not. So that's kind of a tricky situation. But I'm sorry that you're in that situation. I'm sorry that you're having to deal with that, because that is, family is complicated anyway, and when you have to deal with it where you want to stay close to your family but they make it really, really difficult, that's a situation I have a lot of not necessarily a lot of personal experience with, but a lot of sympathy for. So I'm sorry to hear that. Next question is from James Dodd. Ugh, Gaza, Jerusalem, Palestine, Israel, lots of needless suffering. Facepalms himself a bit too hard. Ouch. How are we humans going to sort this out, mate? I mean, I really haven't said anything publicly about it because I'm just sort of at a loss. I mean, I'm at a loss at the how blatant the bloodshed was, and how one-sided it was, and really how one-sided it often is in between Israel and Palestine, because people say, you know, well, both sides do it and both sides antagonize each other. And I mean, that is true, but if you look at the death numbers, the death tolls, it's almost always, you know, in the hundreds of Palestinians and maybe single digits for Israelis, or it's similarly lopsided. It's not as if Israelis don't die or don't have a reason to be pissed off at the Palestinians. That's certainly not the case, but the disproportionate response almost always comes from Israel and affects the Palestinian population. And this bloodshed on the occasion of the new embassy opening, which in and of itself was just a total provocation that should never have happened, that the international community condemned. There was no reason for it to even happen. Trump did it just to be Trump, just to appease his base of religious zealots and bigots, and there was no reason for any of it to happen. But the loss of life, the bloodshed of the Palestinians by the Israelis is shocking. And again, how blatant it is, how it's done in the middle, just, you know, in front of the entire world. And it seems like most of the world, or at least most of the surrounding community, condemned it. But there are those voices in Europe and in the United States and obviously in Israel that see no problem with it at all, that say, well, some of those protesters were armed, or some of them may have been members of Hamas, or as though that justifies just opening fire on a crowd of protesters. It's unfathomable to me. It's awful. And how are we going to sort it out? I have no idea. I mean, I could say something glib like two-state solution, you know, or you know, one state where Palestinians and Israelis have equal rights, but that's not going to happen. And I mean, it would be nice if a two-state solution would happen, but I don't think it's going to happen while Donald Trump is president, and I don't think it's going to happen while Benjamin Netanyahu is the leader of Israel. So, I mean, I don't know. I wish I did. I don't know. That's one of those world situations where it's been that way for as long as I've been alive, and I hold out very little hope that it will be significantly different as long as I am alive. I wish that it were different, but I don't know. But the actions of the Israelis against the Palestinians this week were indefensible, I think. Next question, Tom McDonald. I know you grow tired of all the gardening questions, but I'm wondering if you grow any plants in or around your place. I was Brown Thumb Tom for decades, until about 8 to 10 years ago. I started growing Mammoth and Pikes Peak sunflowers. They grow more than 10 feet high and take next to no care. What color is your thumb? You know, it's funny you mention that. I think we used to have those when I was a kid. One year, a lot of farms around here will grow sunflowers. Not as like a major crop, but maybe just in one little patch. And one year we used to have a garden in the backyard in the house where I grew up. And one year my dad planted sunflowers, and I'm not sure exactly what variety they were, but it was the same thing where they grew like they were huge. I mean, they grew like they were taller than I was. They may have been 10 feet tall. They were massive. And I loved them because they were like, they were like trees. I mean, it was like you put some seeds in the ground, and a few months later, there's like this tree there. You know, but so those sound perfect because I totally have a brown thumb. My wife and I both. There are plants in the house, but they have to be like basically kill-proof plants. We have a heart-shaped leaf philodendron hanging basket that we've had for years. That is the only house plant that has survived in this house for any significant length of time, and it's because it takes so little care. Like you can just fling water at it every couple of weeks, and it seems to be okay. Just put it near the window, give it some sun, and just toast it with a glass of water that you drink, and that's enough for it. I mean, it's very easy to take care of and very easy to kill, and thrives on neglect, which is exactly what I need. But other than that, I don't have a terribly green thumb. I'm not the one to come to for gardening advice at all. Next from Chris Abbey. Well, this is a quick one. This won't take very long. Chris Abbey asks, so have I ever asked a question on here before? Just checking. Chris, I don't know that you have, but feel free to from now on, my friend. You're always welcome to ask a question. But this may be the first one. I'll have to go back and check. And finally, there's 2 questions here from Larry Yellingman, host of the Man Yells at News podcast, by the way, Larry. Larry says, what do you think would be the best way to kill my lawn? Napalm, a bunch of dogs pissing on it at once, or maybe I could just get David Smalley to do his stand-up routine and it would just die naturally. I like that, Larry. Is Smalley a stand-up comic too, or a wannabe stand-up? I think I maybe have heard that before. I know fucking what's his name, Dave Rubin is, and I delight in describing him this way, a failed stand-up comic. And the little bits and pieces of his stand-up that I've seen like from years back, ooh, no mystery there. I mean, no mystery at all why the stand-up comedy career didn't pan out for him. Oh God, even the audiences like at the shows aren't laughing. It's rough, but yeah. Or just have me take care of it, as referenced in a previous question. David Smalley stand-up will probably do it, but if you hire me to be your lawn care professional, that will take care of it too. And also, okay, serious question. Was that not a serious question, the David Smalley thing? Serious question. Have you seen this story yet of a woman taking a shit on the floor of a Tim Hortons? I just want to share my pain. Okay, so I went ahead and looked up this story. I got it loaded in my web browser, so we're just going to look at this together. The headline itself is really worth an entire show. Don't you think? The headline is, woman furiously shits on floor of Tim Hortons, throws it at employees. Can you guess what I think is the funniest part of that headline? She furiously shits on the floor of Tim Hortons. She was so pissed off. She said, take this, motherfucker. A woman in Canada was so incensed about something Tim Hortons employees did or didn't do that she dropped her pants, took a dump on the floor, threw it, grabbed some napkins to wipe her ass, threw those too, and left. And then there's a video of it, which I will spare you. And this is good too. What's particularly baffling, aside from the obvious, is the other customers who don't really react to what's happening. Maybe that's because the tasteful barrier has censored most of it, or maybe it's because there really is nothing to do when a human decides to take a spiteful shit and fling it. Ah, Larry. Thank you for sharing. Just thank you for sharing. Not just for me, but on behalf of everyone watching. I'm sure everyone in the chat would also like to thank you for sharing that story with all of us. So, those are the questions the pre-submitted questions that I'm going to answer for now. So anybody in the chat, if you have questions that you want me to talk about, go ahead and start laying them on me. But yeah, that's a hell of a story, isn't it? I mean, I guess you might assume that the shit would have to be, you'd have to be pretty mad to intentionally shit on a floor like that, but they made sure that you knew. Oh no, she was furious. Okay. Dr. Babylon in the chat says, is the Screwtape Letters really an apologetics book? Let me get the chat up here on the screen so folks can see it. Is the Screwtape Letters really an apologetics book? Yes. Yes, it is. Now, it is more than just an apologetics book. It is also a novel, and a work of satire and a work of humor, you know, and I think it works actually as satire. It works pretty good. I mean, if I try to ignore the religious content of it and try to ignore the points that Lewis is making through the story and just read it as entertainment, it's pretty good. You know, the portion that I covered in the Atheist Reads video that went up today, some of that was great, was just downright hilarious. When Screwtape goes off on his angry rant against, what was it again? Well, he goes off on a rant against God and his hypocrisy, and then he turns on how tough it is to be a demon because they can't do anything without, you know, built-in obstacles, and then he turns on Wormwood for betraying him. Like, it's just a brilliant comic rant. It's just acid and it's hilarious. It's great. But I think it is also an apologist book. I mean, it is written specifically for a purpose. And it is written to put a message across, which is something that satire is supposed to do. And I think you have to count it as an apologetics book. I think it was written with that purpose, and that comes across. But what makes it a lot more palatable than pretty much any other apologetics book I read and reviewed for this series is that it's a really well-written book, and it's a novel, and it works on a level other than like a didactic level. So I like that, but it is still an apologetics book. Thank you, Dr. Strangelove, for the super chat. I appreciate that very much. I've mentioned it a couple times before. I don't solicit super chats or expect them in these, but if you want to leave me a super chat for a couple of bucks, you're always welcome to. I appreciate all of it. If you ask a question in the super chat, I'll make sure to get to it. But yeah, thank you so very much. Not expected, but definitely always welcome. Let me see. Duronder Barber, have you seen Batman Ninja yet? No, I haven't. I haven't seen Batman Ninja yet. Any comments on the school shooting? I mean, here we go again. You know, tragic, awful, discouraging, not unexpected. I mean, how much more can you say about school shootings in the United States where they continue to happen and we continue to not do anything about them? It's you know, it's repulsive and it's unforgivable, and the level of apathy that still exists toward the issue and the level of misdirection and distraction from the pro-gun lobby is unconscionable. I think the NRA is an evil organization, and I think they enable things like this to happen. And I think white supremacists and white nationalists and people who encourage alienated young white men, for the most part, to act out like this are complicit in these kinds of things as well. I think it's disgusting. And there are too goddamn many guns in this country, and until enough of us decide as a community that there are too goddamn many guns and we should do something about lowering the number of guns that are in circulation in the population, and we get serious about that, this isn't going to change. We're too permissive about our attitudes toward guns, and there are just too goddamn many guns in this country. Mystic Mind Analysis. What's your weirdest personal habit? I don't know if it's weird, but maybe idiosyncratic. When I trim my fingernails, I do it on the couch, and I let the trimmings fall into my shirt, and then I bundle my shirt up so that they don't fall off, and I walk over to a trash can and I flip them off into the trash can so that they don't like fall on the floor or anything. Is that, I don't know if it's, I guess it's a little weird, but I mean, that's about it. I don't have like any super weird habits. Oh, okay. This is a good one. Some random geek asking on behalf of Christy, who was also in the chat. I see. Hi, Christy, and hi, some random geek. Thoughts on "This Is America" by Childish Gambino. I was stunned when I first saw it. I've watched it probably 10 times by now. When the first couple days after it came out, I watched it at least half dozen times, and I've sort of not been watching it as much the last few days, but I was floored by it. The first time I saw it, I didn't really know what to think. It reminded me of great poetry, in that you know that you've just seen something great. You know that you've just seen something profound, but you can't quite put it into words. You know, that was my reaction to it. And I appreciate all of the dissections of it and the analysis and looking at, pinpointing the references. I think all of that is fascinating. But when I watch it, what really gets me isn't how dense it is or how referential it is. But it hits me just as a great work of art, like just all at once. And I think Donald Glover, Childish Gambino, I think the guy is a genius. I mean, I mentioned, I said something about this in a Facebook comment, talking about the video where, he hosted Saturday Night Live, and during his monologue on Saturday Night Live, he said, people describe me as a triple threat because I sing and dance and act, but I prefer to think of myself as just a threat. And I watched that video for This Is America, and I thought, God damn, he wasn't kidding. And he's a triple threat in that video because his performance is genius on all three of those levels. Because musically, it's fantastic. It's a great song. And he's an amazing dancer, and he's an amazing actor. And the dancing and the acting work hand in hand. I'll gesture with this hand because it's covered by the other one's covered by the chat. But he's an amazing actor and dancer simultaneously in the video because he gives just a remarkable physical performance. He has complete control of his face and his body, and he's just exuding so much emotion and so much intention, and it's just fantastic. It's stunningly good. Mike Walker, I'm sorry, Mike. I know your name. Mike Walker asks, any thoughts on Lost in Space, the Netflix show? I haven't seen it, so I can't tell you. And sorry, Toby, I know you asked a question. Toby Martin in the chat. Who have you found is the most irritating apologist to dissect? William Lane Craig is super irritating because of his tone and his arrogance, his sort of pomposity. But I keep thinking about how irritated I was with Josh McDowell some years ago when I did Evidence That Demands a Verdict, because he was really full of himself too, and in a different way than Craig is. McDowell was really, he was one of those guys that he's making just really basic arguments that every Christian apologist has made, but he gives them this characteristic, he really believes he's the first one to ever make these arguments. Like he thinks he's laying some real deep shit on you. So that was irritating. And yeah, I probably have to go with him. Oh, Carlisle the Cinephile, good question. Was I spared by Thanos or was I sacrificed for the good of the universe? I went to the website, and sad to say, I was sacrificed for the good of the universe. I didn't make it. Sorry. Or I guess to some folks that might be good news. Yay. Malevolent Divinity. Fuck, marry, kill. Spider-Man, Loki, Peter Quill. Oh, damn. Fuck Loki, marry Peter, kill Spider-Man. Sorry, Spidey. Actually, it's funny. Of those three characters, Spidey is by far my favorite. Like, it's not even close. But, I mean, Loki's obviously the one you want to take to bed. Peter, I think, would be a good husband, and it would be a fun life because he has his own spaceship. He goes on adventures all the time, get to fly around the galaxy. Like, that would be a great life. And Spidey, I mean, you're the odd Spider-Man out. So sorry, Spidey, nothing personal. It's just this is the cruelty of the fuck, marry, kill form. You know, sometimes there are no winners, except for me because I get to fuck Loki and marry Star-Lord. Oh, Der Wunderbar Bar. How strong would Ractigino be in comparison to Earth Coffee? 10 times, perhaps? Yeah, what? How many? I mean, how much stronger than a human is a Klingon? Does a Klingon have like 10 times human strength? Whatever that is, that's how strong the coffee is. I would, you know what? I love a good strong cup of coffee. I would love a straight Ractigino, and I would just like to see if it's really that strong. If they had like a Ractigino, you know, handle at Sheets, and I could just try it, I would totally be there. Green Herring, do you think Disney should make a Marvel Star Wars crossover? No. No, I actually think the properties should remain separate. But you know, they're under the same umbrella, and I think probably if they ever get to the point of oversaturation where Star Wars and the Marvel movies start to dip, like they're not making as much money as they used to, we're probably going to see it. You know, that's something that Disney can keep in its back pocket for when the well starts to run dry. They can be like, make a crossover. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it happen at some point in the future, but I don't see it happening anytime soon, and I don't think it should happen. I think there's plenty of stories to tell within each of those universes that you don't need to smash them together. Jon Brockman, who would win in a fight, Steve or Stuffy? Stuffy doesn't have... Stuffy's too nice. Stuffy is like me without all of the characteristics that would allow me to win that fight. And plus Stuffy's just little. I mean, I'm not trying to, you know, I'm not a tough guy at all. I would probably lose in a fight with quite a few humans of comparable to my size. But Stuffy's just little. So I would kick his ass. Oh, Dylan Jones. You know what? This is a great question, and I think I agree with you, man. Who do you think is the most fun villain to watch in movies or TV? Mine is Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. Anton Chigurh was one of my favorite villains ever. So I think Anton Chigurh is right up there. I would have to put in a vote for Skeletor on the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe cartoon, the original one that was on when I was a kid. Skeletor is one of my favorite villains, one of the great camp villains ever. What else is a good villain and a fun villain to watch? Khan from Star Trek, Q from Star Trek. If you catch, a lot of people don't consider Q a villain, but he is. I mean, he's an antagonist. Q's a lot of fun. Yeah, there are a lot of fun, great villains. Carlisle says Stuffy wins. I'm afraid. I'm sorry to burst your bubble. No, Stuffy's not beating me in a fight. Aid Trance, do you prefer lager or ale? I prefer lager, but I don't really drink either. And at least not much, not anymore. If I'm out with people socially, which almost never happens, but if I'm out with friends or with people socially and people are drinking, I'll order a beer and it'll usually be a lager. But I just on my own, like around the house and left to my own devices, I don't drink alcohol very much at all anymore. Dr. Strangelove, can we talk about the crazy amount of hatred from the Trek community toward Discovery? It's only getting worse and worse. You know, I think that happens with every new Trek show, though. I mean, maybe it's a little more pronounced now because there's such an outrage industry on the internet, and being like just irrationally outraged at something is kind of in fashion on the internet. But you know, there were people who didn't like The Next Generation when it started. There were people who didn't like Deep Space Nine when it started. There were people who didn't like Voyager when it started. There were people who didn't like Enterprise when it started. And there are people who still don't like any of those. But over the years, all of them have become much more widely accepted in the fan community. And the same thing is going to happen to Discovery, especially if the second season is really good. The first season, I can understand why some people might not have liked it, you know, why they might have been a little cold to it. I thought it was terrific, but I get why people might not have liked it. But if season 2 lives up to its potential and is a really great series, or even is a noticeable improvement on the first season, then, you know, I think Discovery is going to be embraced. Just like the new movies, the Kelvin timeline movies. I think people were a little cold to them at first. There are still people who don't really like them or don't choose them as part of their favored part of Star Trek. But Star Trek Beyond, I think, earned a lot of goodwill because Star Trek Beyond was, in many ways, a good old-fashioned Star Trek movie. It was focused on adventure and teamwork and optimism, and it was a great action movie. And it was very much sort of, it was still a departure from the old franchise, but at the same time, it had a lot of those values and a lot of the things that made the original Star Trek and also Next Generation so much fun to watch. So I think there's always, whenever there's a new kind of Star Trek, there's always resistance by people who don't think that it represents what they like about Star Trek. And there will always be some of that, but eventually that will die down and there will be more people who will accept it. I think that's what will happen with Discovery. Rex Lesser, would you ever review Cool World by Ralph Bakshi with your buddy Jason on the Late Seating podcast? I don't know if that meets our criteria for the show. I don't know if that's considered a classic film, but we might, sneak it in somehow. We do occasionally do shows where we intentionally make exceptions to our rules. But the main rule of the show is it has to be 10 years old or older, and it has to be generally considered to be a classic film. And classic doesn't necessarily mean good. It just means a film that is significant, that a lot of people know about, that had a notable impact on the culture or the film industry, that sort of thing. And these are very fuzzy categories, and basically it's up to me and Jason whether we do a movie or not. But Cool World just doesn't strike me right away as falling into that category. But we might. Who knows? Okay, Mike asked, "What about West?" I haven't seen Westworld either, so I'm no good for the current shows. I'm an episode behind on The Handmaid's Tale. We haven't watched the new episode of The Handmaid's Tale yet because it's just so heavy. I mean, I want to watch it because I think it's a great show, and the new season so far has been terrific. But oh my God, it's just brutal. Like it's hard to watch. It's great, but it's hard to watch. Green Herring, have I ever considered opening a t-shirt store? Not really. I don't think I have a big enough audience for that, to be honest. There have been a couple of designs I've sold. I remember a couple years ago, a friend of mine designed a really cool Toby Benson t-shirt that was based on a visual from one of my videos. And it was an awesome shirt. And I put it up for sale and promoted it in videos a few times. And I'd sold not a single shirt. Not one shirt was sold. So I thought, okay, my viewers don't want to buy shirts, or there aren't enough of my viewers to really have a base to, to sell things to. So I just kind of left it sit. And I don't think my audience has grown that much since then. I have a larger audience now than I did then, but it's not like it hasn't grown exponentially. So I don't think there's a lot of demand for Steve themed t-shirts, or merchandise just in general. Thoughts on Giuliani of late? I mean, I hope he keeps doing what he's doing because it's a huge train wreck for Trump, and it's entertaining as hell for me to watch. And I think probably both Avenatti, Stormy Daniels' attorney, and Robert Mueller are probably loving it. Like, yeah, come on, keep talking, Rudy. This is great. They're probably checking shit off of their lists left and right every time Rudy goes on TV. Okay, another one from Mike Walker. Another fight here. How about Hans versus Arnold Schwarzenegger? I think Hans would win that. Again, for the same reason, because Hans has a darkness in him that will not let him go down in defeat. It's weird. It's paradoxical. You might think because Hans is kind of morose and depressed that he would be tougher to beat in a fight, but that actually fuels him. So I think Hans would take out Schwarzenegger, to be honest. And plus, Hans is a dog. And he's a little dog, so you wouldn't see him coming. Toby Martin, how do you maintain your facial hair? I trim it every 2 weeks. I wash it every day when I take a shower with the rest of me, and other than that, I do almost nothing to it. And one of the reasons why I keep it nice and trimmed is so I don't really have to do much to it. It's funny, me and Christy had a hangout recently with Eli Bosnick, and he has a nice big bushy beard now, and we were talking about his beard care before the show, and what he has to do to take care of it, and I don't have to do any of that because I keep it trimmed and nice and tight and short, and you don't really have to do anything to it other than keep it clean and keep it trimmed. So that's my secret. Don't have much of a beard, and you won't have to do a whole lot to take care of it. Carlisle the Cinephile, speaking of Marvel and Star Wars, have you read any of the Star Wars comics? No, I haven't. Actually, I went through a phase a couple years ago where I read a lot of the old Star Trek comics, and I've read some of the more recent Trek comics from IDW. Their series that was based on the new movies I thought was actually really good. But I think that, and then its successor series, I think they're both finished now. But I thought they were terrific. But I don't think I've ever read any Star Wars comics. I've read a lot of old Star Trek comics. From the Gold Key stuff in the 70s up through like the Marvel and DC stuff in the 80s. And I think Dark Horse did Trek comics for a while, and now IDW has the license and they're doing stuff with it. So I've read a lot of that. I haven't read anywhere close to all of it, but I've read a lot of Star Trek, but I haven't read any Star Wars comics. My engagement with Star Wars is almost entirely the films. I have had very little exposure and very little interest in the expanded universe stuff for Star Wars. Star Trek, I've gotten into a little bit of it, but Star Wars, I'm mostly just there for the movies. Malevolent Divinity, if you could save anyone from ye old atheist community from themselves, who would you choose, if any? I wouldn't choose any of them. All of the ones that might need saving are either shitty people or less than shitty people, but are where they are, that it's their own fault. Like there's really nobody in the shitty side of the atheist community or the cowardly chicken shit fence sitting portion of the atheist community. There's nobody that I identify as being there that my heart bleeds for, that I think, oh, if only. I think whatever happens to them, they deserve it. And I have no I have no feeling of responsibility, and I have no desire to save or to win back any of them. They can all go fuck themselves. Matt Machado, what do you think of a Kelvinverse TNG movie? A good idea or awful? I mean, it's still awfully early. The Kelvinverse has only had 4 movies, or 3 movies, 4 movies coming up here. You know, they're doing another one, I guess, to be out in a couple of years. But there's only been 3 movies released in the Kelvinverse so far. If they're already thinking about jumping to TNG with it, I mean, I imagine they'll probably do that at some point. I wouldn't be surprised, you know, so they can just do what they did with Star Trek and just recast it. And I mean, there's commercially, I guess there's a reason to do that. I'm sure there would be interest, but I wouldn't want to see it anytime soon. But if they did, it would be the same as when they did it with Star Trek, with J.J. Abrams' first one. All that would matter is if they did a good job. If they cast good actors and they have a good story and it's a good movie, then I'll probably love it. If it turns out to be shit, then I won't love it so much. But I would like to see I like to see them keep doing. I mean, the cast they have for the Kelvinverse right now, I mean, as long as they can keep everybody under contract and they can convince these people to keep doing Star Trek movies, you know, I like this version of Captain Kirk. I like this version of Spock and McCoy and Uhura. I think these are good characters and good actors playing them. And the idea of continuing to do fun Captain Kirk and Spock movies for a while is very appealing to me. So I'm not anxious for them to jump to Next Generation yet. Although if they did that, then they might actually finally be able to do the crossover movie. See? That they never were able to really do and get right. You know, if they could introduce Next Generation in the Kelvinverse and get that established, and then do a crossover movie with classic Trek in the Kelvinverse and TNG in the Kelvinverse, and actually have both ships and both crews like meet each other and have a shared adventure, that would be awesome. But that's got to be way down the pike. You know what I mean? HK, if you didn't know what year the Screwtape Letters was published, would you guess it was so old? No, actually I wouldn't, except for the references to the Second World War. There's really not a whole lot in it that dates it. A few of Lewis's cultural references and a few of the sort of idiosyncrasies of his idiom that he writes in might mark it as being from the 40s, or at least from earlier in the 20th century. But generally speaking, no, there's not a whole lot that dates it. So no, if you had told me it was written, if I didn't know and you told me it was written in the 80s, you know, and I didn't know who C.S. Lewis was, like I would believe that. There's not a whole lot that really dates it as, oh, that was written in, you know, 1940. No, it's a pretty good book, I have to say. It's the only book I've ever reviewed in an Atheist Reads where I can actually say, for all of the things in it that I find very objectionable in terms of its religious arguments and its moral arguments, as a piece of writing, it's very good. It's refreshing. Have you ever thought about doing a video on the FASA Star Trek universe? What's the FASA Star Trek universe? I don't even know what that is. Shows you what a great Star Trek. See, I did that video where I took Star Trek quizzes and I got a couple questions wrong, and now you see why. The FASA Star Trek universe, or I don't know. I don't know what that is. It's an abbreviation for something, but I don't know what it is. Aid Trance, atheist to atheist. Are you fazed or bothered by death? Yes, tremendously. I am hugely bothered by death. I do not want to die at all. Period. And it fucks with me big time, knowing that someday I'm going to die. I'm afraid of it. I'm not looking forward to it. It sucks. Yes, I am bothered by it immensely. Have you considered, Richard Welsh, have you considered that Trump is using Giuliani to hold the line with the Republican base because whatever the special counsel reveals will ultimately need to rely on impeachment, which is political? Maybe. I mean, maybe I would have to think either he or the much more intelligent people around him have to be thinking strategically at this point. I mean, I don't think him getting away with whatever he has done, I don't think is really an option anymore. It's how to mitigate the consequences. And if it turns out that what he did has to be dealt with through impeachment, then trying to shore up political support is probably his best bet. So that's a good guess. I don't know for a fact, obviously, but that's a good guess. Another one from Derwonder Barbar. Thank you very much. Another super chat. Have you ever stared in Klingon? How do you stare in Klingon? Is that a Klingon stare? Worf always, you know, because of the way the appliance was, he always kind of looked like he was looking, you know, with his forehead over his eyes, like looking from under his brow at you. Is that a Klingon stare? I don't know. I guess if that's a Klingon stare, then I have. If not, I haven't. Oh, like Gowron. I get it. Like, I see. Your blood will paint the way to the future. Like that? Is that a Gowron stare? Yeah. There you go. This is an interesting question from Rookie11. Do you think being a vegetarian is immoral? No. No, I don't. Dr. Strangelove, Tom Hardy as Kelvin Picard. Actually, I mean, we're running out of time. I think he's rapidly aging out of the role. But if a couple years ago, if they had wanted to recast Captain Picard, my dream choice was Christopher Eccleston. I think he would have been fantastic. And he's not that old. Like, if they wanted to make the movie now, I think he could still play it and be a good Captain Picard and play the role for several movies. But Christopher Eccleston would have been my guy to be recast, like, you know, rebooted Captain Picard. But as for now, I don't know. It would be funny if they did. I mean, since Tom Hardy played Shinzon in earlier in his career, it would be, I mean, and now he's turned out to be this amazing actor. I mean, it would be an interesting shot. It would be interesting to try it to see if he could play Captain Picard. But yeah, my dream casting would be Christopher Eccleston. Here's an interesting one. How does the Screwtape Letters compare to the Narnia books? You know, except for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that we read in school, I never read any of the Narnia books. So I can't really, I remember very little of Wardrobe, so I can't really compare them. But like I say, I mean, Screwtape is a pretty good book. But I don't know how it compares to the Narnia books, because I've only read one and I barely remember it. Oh, okay, I see. FASA is the role playing games, the Star Trek role playing games. I know nothing about those, so I would have I would have to do research. I guess I could do a Trek. I mean, it is conceivable that I'll do Trek Actually videos in the future about elements of Star Trek that aren't on screen. You know, about maybe some of the novels or the comics or some of the games that I'm familiar with, but I've never played any of the role playing games, so I would have to do some research on that. But it's conceivable, you know. It's not something that's naturally in my wheelhouse. I would like to do something. I loved in the '90s they came out with these PC games. There was Star Trek: The 25th Anniversary, and then there was Star Trek: Judgement Rights. And I had both of those games and played them endlessly and loved them. And I have them here. I got them a couple years ago on online, and I play them sometimes, and now they're kind of quaint, you know, but I would love to do a video about those, even if it was just maybe a not actually Trek Actually, where I'm just playing through them a little bit, you know, just to do like a fun 10 or 15 minute video like I did with the quizzes earlier this week, because I love those games, and looking back at them now, they're so corny and quaint. So maybe something like that, but I don't know. I don't know. Oh, I've heard that Bridge Crew is good. Yeah, I've heard that Bridge Crew is good. I've never played it. Is that's the VR one, right? That's the new one that just came out. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna turn away from the chat for a minute, and I'm gonna answer a few more of these questions that were submitted as comments to the last episode. And there's only a few of them. I think there's only 3 of them. And then we'll come back and we'll end the show with a lightning round. So if you have a question that you think would be good for the lightning round, hold on to it. Don't ask it yet. Don't type it out yet. But when I answer these last couple of pre-submitted questions from comments from last time, then I'll put the timer on, and we'll have 5 minutes, and we'll just do rapid fire lightning round questions. So first, questions from comments on the last video. This is from Steve EAB. In light of cases. Let's do it like you've done this before. In cases such as Eric Schneiderman recently resigning, can you speak as to why self-proclaimed male feminists seem to be the worst misogynists? Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that people are blind to their own faults, and they're blind to the ways in which they do not live up to their own image of themselves. And I think, you know, whenever I see a feminist say, you know, I hate male feminists, or I hate men who proclaim themselves to be feminists, I completely understand that, and that's why I'm careful about that. Like I don't broadcast, I don't call myself a feminist. I don't wear, like, you know, this is what a feminist looks like t-shirts. I try not to be too outspoken about that, not because I'm ashamed of being associated with feminism, because I think feminism is a noble and necessary cause, and I support it as much as I possibly can. But it's a woman's movement, and it should be led by women, and men should support it, as I try to do. But I think it should be led by, and it should be primarily for women. And I think men should have supporting roles, and recognize that it's not ultimately for us. And I think, you know, being a feminist is a good thing, and it's something that is viewed in a very positive light in certain circles. So, you know, a man can think of himself very highly and think, you know what, I'm a good guy, I'm a feminist, you know, I'm one of the good guys. And once you get into that mindset, and you convince yourself that you're one of the good guys, then whenever something happens to contradict you being a good guy, you're more inclined to just dismiss it, or to rationalize it away, or to come up with an excuse as to why, well, okay, maybe I did do that, or maybe I did say that, or think that, or whatever, but I'm still a good guy. I'm still a male feminist. I'm still one of the good ones, right? You know, it becomes this impenetrable logic that you just can't get through. And that, I think, is what allows, and that's just the people who are there, honestly. There are also, I'm sure there are predatory people and abusive people who are knowingly co-opting that label in order to take advantage of people, or to steal respect for themselves that they haven't earned. But for people who aren't aware of any of that, and are just unknowingly calling themselves feminists, but are just being huge dicks. I think that's a lot of the problem, is that you lose the ability and you lose the willingness and the awareness of the necessity of examining your own attitudes. So you think, oh, I'm a feminist, and it's like, I'm done, I'm finished, you know, I am what I'm supposed to be. And that's a really shitty place to be, because we're never finished as people, as growing human beings. We can always be better. We can always fix something. We can always revise our attitudes. We can always learn how to do something better. And if you've decided that you're done, I'm a feminist, I'm good, and if I do something that's wrong, well, okay, but give me a break, I'm one of the good guys. You know, that's not a good way to be. That's not a good way to be. And I think that's the case with a lot of people who call themselves male feminists. And it's one of the reasons why, like I say, when women say, oh, male feminists, and they shake their heads, I completely get it. And I try to say, I try to describe myself more in terms of aspiring to be a feminist, or wanting to be thought of as a feminist, wanting to demonstrate through my actions that I'm that kind of person, not claiming the label for myself and wearing it and saying, I'm a feminist, you know, because that's, a lot of people do that, and they talk the talk and they do not remotely walk the walk. Next is another Volvox fan. What is the most disgusting opinion you hold that is not important enough to fix? I don't know if this is the most disgusting opinion I hold, but I do have I have a terrible, terrible prejudice against people who drive loud automobiles, whether it's a motorcycle or a car or a truck. I see no value in it. I see no reason for it. And if I don't know a person and know that they're a good person, or know that they're cool or whatever, or have some reason not to judge them harshly, and I see and hear someone come roaring by in a loud car or a loud truck, or especially a loud motorcycle, I instantly think extremely poorly of them. And I recognize that that's bad on my part. That's you know, a prejudgment on my part, and that I shouldn't do it, because lots of people own motorcycles and are lovely people. I mean, Aaron Ra rides a motorcycle. Aaron Ra is an awesome person, right? Lots of people, it doesn't make any difference how loud their car or their truck or their bike is. You know, they're great people. So that's on me. But yeah, that's probably it. My anti-loud vehicle prejudice is something that I know is wrong, but it's never seemed like it's affected my life or other people's lives that much that I need to work on it. But it's something I probably should work on, if I'm honest. I don't know if I should make it a top priority, but it's bad. It's, you know, it's a prejudice, and it's not good, you know, probably that. And finally, from Danae Dennison. Is it wrong to want friends of various social groups like people of color or LGBTQ folks to broaden my perspective? I like people, and I only want to get to know more diverse people. How can I go about that in a thoughtful, non-usy way? I think just approach them as people. Just think of them as friends. You know, think of them as relationships that you have. Don't look at them as, you know, my gay friend, my trans friend, my black friend, my Latinx friend. Teach me, you know. If you value them and see them as individuals and as people who you like and enjoy having in your life and have things in common with, just being around people of different backgrounds will broaden your horizons just by itself. You know, I because of the internet, thankfully, I'm incredibly grateful. I have a great number of friends who are diverse in so many ways. I have so many trans friends now. I have so many friends who are women, trans and cis. I have so many friends who are not Americans, which is really good for me as an American. I have so many friends who are not white, or who grew up in countries where English was not their first language, or come from different religious backgrounds than either. I have such a wonderful diversity, and such a wonderful diversity of diversity in my circle of friends, and also my broader circle of acquaintances and people that I just know but maybe aren't super close with. And I just I can't, we almost never talk about things that are specific to their identity. You know, I never say, so what's it like to be a black person? We've never had that conversation. But just getting to know people from a diversity of backgrounds and listening to them and paying attention to them and getting to know them and getting to know lots of people from those different categories. That's what does it. You know, just making friends and listening to people from different backgrounds and just viewing them as people, you know, and you'll learn without even realizing that you're learning, and you'll grow and change and become better educated and better, more sensitive and more thoughtful. And all you have to do is open yourself up to relationships with different people. And I think it'll happen automatically. So, you know, just don't worry about, okay, I'm going to, you know, I have to have a trans friend, and I have to have a gay friend, and I have to have, you know, a friend from this category and this category and this category. And I need to make sure that I'm, you know, I'm absorbing what they're putting out. Like, you just be friends with lots of different people and lots of different kinds of people. And I think it'll work itself out. At least, I mean, maybe I'm being too simplistic. Maybe I'm being naive, but that's how it's been for me. You know, and I'm so grateful for it. It's one of the greatest gifts the internet has given me, is having a circle of friends of so many different kinds of people. Okay, now, you know what it's time for. It's time for
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
I hope that wasn't too loud this time. I turned it down because a few of you made me aware that it was super duper loud last time. So I tried to I tried to tone it down a little bit. I hope it didn't blast anybody's ears. So, okay, here we go. I got the chat back up. So I'm going to start the timer, and anybody who has questions they want to be answered in the lightning round, you will have 5 minutes. I will answer as many of them as I possibly can, as quickly as I possibly can. Here we go. Okay. Johnny the Wolf. Okay, I'll start with Christy here. A couple of them are piled up. If you could see any movie in a cinema with only you and people you like, which film in all of film history would you watch? I've never seen I lie. I have seen it once. My favorite film ever is Buster Keaton's Sherlock Jr. I've seen it on a big screen once in my life, and I would love to see it again, and I would love to bring all the people I love and care about into the theater with me. So Sherlock Jr., my all-time favorite movie. Johnny the Wolf. Steve, if Jordan B. Peterson were in your room at the moment, would you slap him happily? Oh, God, yes. Oh, God, yes. Oh, my God, Steve said he would use violence on somebody. He's an asshole. He's a huge asshole. Jon Brockman, which is worse, being stuck in traffic and really having to pee, or stabbing yourself in the gums with a nacho corner? Traffic and having to pee, because that's a long-term thing. You never know when that's going to end. Rex Lesser, have you ever watched a video? Oh, they're going so fast. They're going so fast. Have you ever watched a video by Right Wing Watch, or ever heard of him? If you watched a video by him, what's your thoughts? Right Wing Watch? I don't think so. No, I don't think I've watched any. Some Random Geeks. Steve, I've thought about getting Movie Pass. No, actually, I haven't seen, maybe it would help. I haven't seen that. I don't see that many movies. So my first thought is, well, you know, wouldn't do me any good, but maybe if I had it, I would see more movies. Thank you, HK, for the super chat. I really appreciate that. Dr. Babylon, you didn't answer my pre-submitted question. Oh shit, you know what? I didn't. I'm sorry. I forgot to load it. I forgot to ask to put it in my file. I must have overlooked it. I'm really sorry. You know what? Let me finish the lightning round, and then I'll go back and find it, and I'll answer it. I'm sorry about that. I try to answer all the pre-submitted questions. So I will get to it. Tom McDonald, are you excited about Babylon 5 coming to Amazon Prime next month? Yes, actually. I haven't watched Babylon 5 in forever, so I would love to check it out again. It's been a long time since I've seen it. Why do we have kids? This is from Ayala H. Why do we have kids if we know they will suffer? I think the best answer to that is actually a quote from the TV show Angel. Which shows you my frame of reference, where someone asked Angel a similar question. Why would anyone bring a child into this fucking awful world? And Angel said, to make it better, maybe. Which is poetic, but incredibly naive, and probably doesn't come close to addressing the concern. But that's the thing that I thought of. Lars von Trier, yeah, if Dynacat loves me. If I don't know who does, I have no idea. Mrs. Female Woman, Lars von Trier, yes or no? Yes, but extremely problematic. Extremely problematic. Dr. Strangelove, NX-01 or USS Kelvin? I would pick the NX-01. I actually like the Enterprise version of the Enterprise, so I would pick that one. Although what we saw of the Kelvin was cool too, but I would pick the NX-01. Tamak Tanti, how do you feel about Secular Talk / Kyle Kulinski? I don't watch him very much, so I don't have a strong opinion. What little I've seen of him, I think he's fine. I think he's all right, but I'm not like a regular viewer, so I don't have like a really strong opinion of him. Oh, this is a great one here. Roman Lives, bananas on cereal or strawberries? Of the two, I would have to say strawberries, but I'm not a fan of either one. I like strawberries more than bananas. I can't stand bananas. I'm not a banana eater at all. So I would go with strawberries, but I don't prefer either of them. Okay, Fallout 2 Forever. I'm male and I consider myself a feminist, but I know I have a lot to learn, and I'm always willing to admit that I'm wrong. Do you think I'm on the right track? Yeah. Yeah. Anytime you have that attitude about anything where you say, I know I have a lot to learn and I'm willing to try and learn, I think you're on the right track no matter what. I think that's a great attitude to have. Some random geek, best fruit or favorite fruit? Probably apples. I love apples. Apples are the only fruit that I actually keep in the house on a regular basis. I have an apple. I eat an apple like as a side dish. God, Random Geek is really, he's helping me fill out the lightning round because I got through the questions quicker than I thought I would. Best tea. Well, the tea I'm drinking right now is just plain old black leaf tea. That's really the only tea that I ever drink. Earl Grey is okay, but that's just because it has a Star Trek connection, and it's really, you know. Jon Brockman, apples? The fuck? Bananas, motherfucker. I don't like bananas, John. Jesus. Time's up. I hate to end the lightning round on such an angry note, but damn it, John. You leave me no choice. You come at me with that banana bullshit. I'm sorry. Okay, now, bear with me for a second here. This is not planned, but Dr. Babylon did point out to me that he did ask a pre-submitted question in the comments of the last episode of this series, the last live stream, and I do want to make sure I go back and answer that question because Dr. Babylon is a longtime viewer, and he was kind enough to submit a question for me to answer, and I completely unintentionally I missed it, so I'm going to go back and find it, and then I'll put it on screen so everybody can see it, and I will answer it. Okay, is it the comment that starts, Steve, thank you for welcoming me to the Democrats? Because I think that's the only comment you left. Okay. Okay, so here's Dr. Babylon's question. Steve, thank you for welcoming me to the Democrats and understanding why it was a struggle to change my registration, which we talked about in the last edition of this show. I imagine that this is how it feels to finally be out of a toxic relationship. I recognize that you and I disagree about abortion, but do you at least understand why I am pro-life? I strongly believe that many/most pro-life religious conservatives oppose abortion mainly because it contradicts their views of proper sexuality, womanhood, and next to that, human life is secondary. I think this backwards mentality accounts for what you once called their hypocritical selective empathy. I'd like to see abortion become illegal nationwide someday, but if the government is going to do that, then it also needs to help young families, mothers, especially those on low incomes, as well as provide universal prenatal and postpartum care as components of a single-payer plan. It's also important to increase access to contraceptives, which fortunately have become more reliable so that people can be sexually active while avoiding unwanted pregnancies. Yeah, you know, I think we've talked about this, at least we've talked about certain parts of this in the past, in another question that you asked me. And yeah, I mean, I do understand your reasons. I do understand your reasons. And I appreciate the fact that, you know, you seem genuinely concerned for the lives and the well-being of everyone involved. And I respect that. And I much prefer your version of being pro-life, where, I mean, again, we're always going to be, I think, apart on whether or not abortion should be legal, because I think it should be legal, and I think it should be easy to access, and I think it should be safe and affordable. I am pro-abortion being legal and available to people, but I much prefer your version of pro-life, where you say, okay, if we're going to require that people who are pregnant see that pregnancy through to its natural conclusion, then we are going to make damn sure that the children who are born as a result of those pregnancies will be taken care of, that the parents will have the resources they need to care for those kids, that society itself will be set up in such a way so that those children and those parents will have what they need and will be able to raise those children in a healthy, supportive way, and their needs will be met. And I am 100% with you that the pro-life movement as it currently exists, which is predominantly religious, which supports banning abortion, but also supports almost nothing in terms of helping low-income people, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. If you believe that abortion should be illegal, if you believe that a pregnant person should not have that option to end their own pregnancy if they see fit, then you would damn well better be also in favor of creating circumstances and putting resources in place to help people who choose to keep that child after it's born, raise that child and give it the life it deserves, and give it, you know, meet its needs and meet their needs as the parents. You better make damn sure that that's available, and that you have fought just as hard for that as you have fought to prevent that pregnant person from having the right to end their pregnancy. So again, I understand your reasons, and again, I respect your version of being pro-life more than I respect most other versions of it that I have seen. But personally, I think that abortion should be an option. And I think if you want to reduce the number of abortions, which I think is a perfectly fine thing to want, if you want to reduce the number of abortions that occur, then I think things like increasing access to medical care and increasing access to contraceptives and these sorts of things are things that we should all support. I don't take it to the point of saying, and we should outlaw abortion. I think abortion should be legal for people who need it or want it. But I also think that we should have resources in place to prevent abortion by giving people hope that if they do have a child that maybe they didn't plan for, that it's not going to completely derail their lives and put them into inescapable poverty or, you know, sidetrack their whole life. There are people, I'm sure, who elect to have an abortion simply because they don't think they can afford it, or they don't have a place in their life for it at the moment. And if some of those people could be prevented from having abortion, either by giving them better access to contraceptives so they don't get pregnant in the first place, or giving them assurances that resources are in place so that they will be able to care for a child that they weren't planning on having, then I think that's terrific. But I still think that abortion should be an option. I think a person who is pregnant should have the right to decide whether or not they want to still be pregnant. And I think we're just going to have to disagree on that. But your take on the pro-life stance is certainly a lot more palatable to me than most others. So thank you very much for that. And I understand your reasons. And even though I as I've said already a couple times, I disagree with wanting to make abortion illegal. I understand them. I understand your reasons, and I respect them. So yeah, that's it. You know what? That's it. I'm done. We went about 15 minutes over. I appreciate everybody sticking with me. I appreciate the kind attention and the indulgence. And Dr. Babylon, I'm sorry that I skipped your question. I hope that my answer was satisfactory. And yeah, so everybody watching, if this was entertaining to you, thank you. I'll do this again in about 2 more weeks. Not next Friday, but Friday after that. We do these bi-weekly or semi-monthly, however you like to say it. If you cannot be here live and you can't ask a question in the live chat, then you can always ask a question in the form of a comment on the most recent episode of the Ask Away series, and I'll try to not miss them as I missed Dr. Babylon's question, and answer them at the beginning of the show or in the middle of the show. If you're a Patreon patron, I usually solicit questions a few days in advance, and I try to answer those at the very beginning of the show, so people who can't be here live can still ask questions and have them answered. And if you like what I do, if you can afford it and you think I'm worth it, you can always support my work through Patreon by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives. You can pledge as little as $1 a month, and those $1 a month pledges help me more than you would believe. You can pledge more than that, and you can take advantage of perks in the program if you so choose. And I would also like to remind you, especially with this being Friday, that I co-host a couple of podcasts that are a part of the Let Me Listen podcast family, specifically the Late Seating podcast, which had a new episode go up last week, and the Ensign's Log podcast, which is a goofy, funny improv comedy podcast that me and Jason do, that had a new episode go up today, where we play low-ranking officers on a certain famous starship that starts with an E and ends with an E. And I think you can figure out which starship it is. But we have to be coy about it because it's an unlicensed show. But anyway, it's an awesome show. I love doing it. It's one of the funnest things I've done in a long time, the Ensign's Log, and it's a new episode that's up today. You can listen to the Ensign's Logs and all the past episodes, and you can listen to the Late Seating podcast and all the past episodes of that, and all of the other awesome Let Me Listen podcasts by going to letmelistenpodcast.com. It is right there on your screen. That's it, folks. Thank you so much for being with me. Thanks to all of you in the chat for asking great questions. Thanks to the moderators for keeping order in the chat. I appreciate it. And I'll see y'all next time. Take care.